Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Samaan, and it's wonderful being with you once again as we talk about Christian counseling and how it can help you in your daily life. I'm director of New Horizons Institute of Counseling. I'm a clinical pastoral counselor, and we are a mission office of the Daytona Church of the United Brethren in Christ. We're out here to help you and anyone that needs advice, counsel from a faith-based perspective. That's adding that third part to us: body, soul, and spirit. And when we put it all together, we get a much better approach to healing, to dealing with issues, and so on. So please look at the previous sessions and episodes and see what might help you as we continue this series in anxiety. Today we're talking about fueling anxiety. There's different reasons for anxiety. They're still trying to figure it all out. We talked about some of them. Today we're talking about more of that environmental, psychological interaction that occurs that can fuel the anxiety. It's sort of like kindling to a fire. It can slowly get it started, and the big logs can come on later to ignite as that kindling gets accumulated and hotter in the fire. In fueling anxiety, there's a number of reasons for it. Everybody's different. You can't just put a formula and say, this is the way it is for everybody. So you look at your situation, your life, your thoughts, your feelings, and put it together. The most important thing is acknowledging it's there. If you have it, face it. Don't push it down, because the longer it stays down, the more powerful it becomes. It's like fueling more kindling to the fire. It's just going to get larger and larger, and those big logs that might be in your mind, in your memories, are eventually going to ignite because the kindling has brought up the heat to that point. We don't want those big logs to ignite. If we can deal with those little things that I'm speaking of as kindling, then it can lessen the heat, lessen the power, and perhaps even put it out, decrease it from occurring at all, stopping it from occurring at all. Our thoughts have a lot to do with that. The things that go on around us have a lot to do with that. I'm putting up a scan of the brain that I wanted you to see. This comes from Amen Clinic's Dr. Daniel Amen, who is an MD and psychiatrist, has been doing research for many years on the brain. And here's an example of SPECT scan of the brain with anxiety. Now there's different kinds of anxiety. It's going to show up differently in different scans depending on what's going on there. This is more the picture on the right that you're seeing, more of a general look at what anxiety might look like inside the brain. Here you see in the middle portion towards the front of the brain, so that would be at the top of this picture. The middle portion in the middle, that's in that limbic system that we've been talking about, that fear and emotion center of the brain. This is the basal ganglia that you see in red and white. Now, keep in mind that in the SPECT scan, someone's laying there relaxed, supposed to be relaxed. Might take 20 minutes for the scan to complete. And if they're relaxed, the blue area that you see is the brain's metabolic flow. So that's blood flow, electrical firing, activity going on. So in the blue, that part of the brain, most of the brain is relaxed. It's running about 45% capacity at that moment when it's relaxed. And actually, that entire brain should look pretty much blue, relaxed. But you can see it's not. The red is parts of the brain, and those are neural pathways and so on going on there, where it's running about 80%, 75% capacity. And it shouldn't be. It should be blue. The white is running 95% capacity when the person's relaxed. That means there's a lot going on there. And so we can see in this limbic region, these parts of the brain overworking, even though the person is trying to relax. And we see towards the back of the brain, other parts of the brain overworking when they should also be blue, 45%. Instead, they're running 95%. Too much going on up there. And you see in the picture on the left, a SPECT scan of what Dr. Amen would describe as an over-focused anxiety. And there are more areas of the brain running much too fast, 95% capacity in the white, 70, 75, 80% capacity in the red. This person could be having a panic attack, anxiety attack while they're in the scan, or there's too much going on in their mind that they're over-focused on something and it's really bothering them. This is similar to the ring of fire that's described with ADHD with some young people that are just really basically almost out of control. We'll be talking somewhat about that in another episode. But gosh, you can see just looking at these scans, this is anxiety. This is what's going on in the mind. And it doesn't have to be this way. It can be fixed. It can be decreased in severity. It can be brought to a point of either healing or comfort and peace where you're in control. The brain's not in control. And that's what we want. We want to deal with these things. We want to face them. So when we're looking at kindling to anxiety, we go back to the next scan where we see God's law of love. Now, I drew this out, and I hope you can see it. There's so much there, it's hard to put it all on one screen, but it gives you a good picture of some of these things that happen from birth on. And I combined this with what the Bible tells us and what they've learned in research that correlates with what the Bible tells us. It's just amazing. When you study the Bible, you begin to see these things that were written 2,000, 3,000 years ago or longer. Today, science is backing it up with what they're discovering in science today. And this is something that's being backed up. God's law of love, God's design template for life operation. And I took this from Scripture, but also in combining with the attachment model in counseling, the learning model, and Dr. Timothy Jennings, who wrote the book about the brain. He's done a lot of work in combining the understanding of God's love and God's creation with His love, putting His love into all creation with science today. And he has a Common Reason Ministries integrative, evidence-based, he calls it, model for looking at anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. What we see here is a cycle. We see a flow. And at the top, we see God's intended flow of love. You speak of love and, it's kind of like the hippie times back in the 60s and 70s. I remember when I graduated high school, I was thinking, well, maybe I should go to a commune, or maybe I should hitchhike around the world or around the country. And, we let our hair grow a little longer back then, and I even remember growing a beard for a little while. All these ideas that we had about love, about the way things ought to be. Well, that's a seed that God put in everything that He's created, as we look at it in faith-based counseling. And in that seed, there's satisfaction, security, and significance. 3 overall needs that encompass all the other needs. When we feel that, we feel a sense of freedom, a sense of giving, altruism, service we want to do for others. When you feel that sense of wholeness and love, you have greater compassion, you want to do, you want to help. Brings about fruits, and the fruits are those things of the Spirit like joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Lots of other fruits, but those are some big ones that the Bible teaches us about. Well, then there's appreciation and serenity. We want to stay in that loop that's up above in this diagram, because with that brings trust, harmony, hope. And if the longer we can stay in that feel-good zone, and it is a feel-good zone, bad things happen and you have those dips, but pretty much you want to keep your thoughts in that area of thinking good thoughts. Just what the Bible tells us to do. Think on those things that are good. Think on those things that are pure and holy. Go to Philippians chapter 4. We're going to talk about that at another time. Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 to 8, and read about that. We'll be getting into that in more detail a little later. So this is wonderful if we can stay up here, especially when we're young, we're growing, we're little kids. We have a loving mom who greets us, who loves us, who nurtures us, and all those things, a safe environment. It's easier to stay up here. But when we have a problem, we stub our toe, as a toddler might do. What is he going to do? He's going to cry. He's going to get upset. And broken love and trust changes the brain. If that's not dealt with, if the nurturing isn't there, the love isn't there to help bring them out of that fear and pain part, then they get stuck. Because what happens is they're seeking reassurance and attachment at those times. Like, mommy, my foot, look what happened, and it hurts. And if mommy is receptive, like we see in the picture up above, then, there's okay. And they push away after about, 30 seconds or so, maybe a couple minutes, because they want to go play again. And that's it, it's over. But if mom is unable to bond, not blaming mom, she may have had a mom that was unable to bond as well, or there may have been other issues. If often there's no one reaching back in giving that comfort and reassurance, that loop of fear and pain becomes strongly imprinted in the child's brain. they get stuck down here. And so they loop back around instead of coming up out of that into that love region. They loop into rejection, powerlessness, invalidation, taintedness, guilt or shame, and certainly confusion, because that can be very confusing, because inside they're thinking, you're supposed to protect me, you're supposed to be there to nurture me, you're supposed to love me, and that's not happening. Well, the child's going to get confused over that. And if this loop continues, then within that child develops self-protection. It's just kind of natural. Somebody steps on your toe over and over again. Next time they come by, you're going to move your foot. Self-protection. And self-protection usually results over time with selfishness. Selfishness sounds bad. I guess it is bad. We don't want to be selfish. We don't want to just think of ourselves. But we do when we're hurt. When we get self-protected or guarded in some way, we're now thinking more about our needs to protect ourselves, to get our needs met, than we are for the other. And so that child begins to protect themselves selfishly by getting angry. So that usually that first response. And when they get angry, they get demanding. And if you give in too quickly, or if you give in at all in some cases, that reinforces that. Yet it doesn't satisfy it, because they can get what they want, and it's not enough. Because what's happened is this cycle keeps repeating. They're not feeling reassurance. They're not receiving trust, building trust inside of them. They don't trust you're going to meet their needs. They only know that they have to demand to get what they want. So that distrust forms. And in the distrust, jealousy builds. Control builds. Dysfunction in many ways increases. Anger, depression, and what we've been talking about in this series, anxiety. Because now they're not even sure why they're feeling what they're feeling, because inside, in that unconscious part of their mind, those memories perhaps, or other things, are generating that limbic system, that fear and emotion center of the brain, to kick into gear. And as we've spoken of, the amygdala, the fight or flight center, that triggers the activation of all that, it has trouble cycling down because it gets so used to doing what it's doing, sort of like we do. If we have a habit doing something, they say it takes 21 days to form a new habit, another 21 days to reinforce a new habit. So 21 days to break an old habit, I should say, 21 days to reinforce a new one. Well, when that happens, before you know it, you can have an addiction going on. It's out of your control. A compulsion has formed, a forceful urge to carry out with that habit, and the discomfort increases when you're not able, or there's resistance to carrying out with that habit. So the compulsion can turn into an addiction. And when that occurs, I can't get what I want or need. I don't have quick access to it. Why am I so uncomfortable about that? Why is this tension building up? Why is my thoughts racing? What's going on? Why am I getting dizzy? What's happening? Why are my muscles feeling weak, or I'm feeling so tense. Nothing happened that I know of just now, but there's that impression that something is going to happen. You're either not going to get what you want, you don't trust, or the anticipation that something bad is going to happen. So this cycle intensifies and imprints in the mind, making it more easy for it to reoccur if you don't get out of here quick. And that's why it's so important to address these things when you're young. Doesn't mean you can't change when you're older, but it's harder to change when you're older. And as they say, hard to teach an old dog new tricks. I have to, when I'm making a change, I've got to do it a little longer, form that habit more often and over a longer period. It wasn't like when I was younger and I could make that adjustment just so quickly. Now, you got to work a little harder at it. That's the way our brain is. The brain is forming new pathways. And to form those new pathways, the brain needs help. It gets its help naturally through the proteins that are formed in the brain. And those proteins feed and nurture, just like mom feeds and nurtures that child to grow, to come up here in this area of thriving. The brain's doing the same thing. It feeds and nurtures the neurons, the brain cells, to thrive. But also, if there's an inability to bond, if there's troubles, crisis, trauma, and it's ongoing, the brain has trouble as well. And so we'll be talking about the proteins involved and what happens with that cycle and how we can change it to improve, to push back the bad and bring up the good, so we can get out of this fear and pain area and come up into this area of love and peace, serenity, this area that feels good, feels better up here. It's longer lasting up here. Down here, they're escaping to feel better, escaping to drugs, alcohol, stimulating behaviors. So broken love and trust changes the brain, resulting in fear and selfishness that leads to destructive behaviors, inability to self-soothe, blaming. That's the first sign when you see someone blaming all the time. Something's going on there. They're not able to self-soothe. And other acts of self-preservation. Now, the Bible lumps that into sin. A lot of people don't want to talk about sin nowadays. All that word means is anything that's going to hurt you or hurt someone else. That's sin. That's all. We can explain it out in that manner. It's something that eventually is going to cause you problems. So God has addressed that using that one simple word to encompass all those things. And he doesn't say you can't. He says, if you do, these things might happen, probably will happen. And yet he says, I'll be there in helping you through it. We need help through these things. We can't do them alone. So our loved ones, people that care about us, that we care about, people we trust, we need access to those individuals, and to pull away from the others who are negative and cynical and giving us criticism and so on. You know, little criticism is okay, but if someone's constantly doing it, it's not okay. So we avoid those people. Sometimes, you know, if they're family especially, well, you got to be around them at times so you learn how to adjust. But it's hard to do when you're doing it by yourself. So you need a team, close friends, close family, people you trust, counselors, advisors, whatever you can put around you as a team to help support you, let's say. If you only have one support, well, you're asking too much of one person or one thing, and eventually it's going to collapse on you. And you panic because you're afraid, gee, I've got no one else or nothing else. And you do that. You cling, you grab, you grasp, you hold on, you control, and you over-control. And what does that do? Well, if it's a person, they're just going to do that. They're going to pull away. They can't handle it. We want more support. Family, friends, church, work, peers, and so on. All those things hold us up and help us in dealing with whatever. And when one thing drops off, we're not so upset because we've got others to help us through the day, through the week, through our life. That's seeking reassurance and attachment in healthy ways as we get older, and that decreases the kindling, hopefully putting out the fire so those big logs don't ignite. We can do it early, we can do it in our midlife, we can do it when we're older, but we got to start doing it. And we'll be talking some more about how to do it. I hope this was helpful for you today. I'm Dr. Pierre Samaan. Send us an email if you have questions or if you have added thoughts about this. We'd love to hear from you. Bye.